This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to episode 248 of a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's at geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I have Ken Falke, and he is a retired from the U.S. Navy. He is a leadership consultant, serial entrepreneur, and the author of a book called Lead Well, which we'll be talking about today. He's also written some other stuff, which we'll get into a little bit, and talk about some of the nonprofits that he's worked with and founded, and just get into all about leadership today. So, with all that being said, Ken, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it.
So, just to lay some context for our conversation, can you tell the audience about how you got to where you are today and what your career in the Navy was like?
Yeah, it's a long story, but I'll make it as short as I can. I joined the Navy at the age of 19 years old after a failed attempt to play professional ice hockey.
Oh.
And I joined the Navy as the lowest rank that you can enlist in, which is an E1, the first pay grade for the enlisted ranks, with this dream of becoming a Navy SEAL. That was my vision. And I got to boot camp and took all the tests, which I passed, with the exception of my physical, where I failed an eye test. And it basically took me out of the running for SEAL training. So I spent the first 18 months of my Navy career where I got promoted in a pretty rapid fashion to the rank of E4, and what is known as the Navy Ceremonial Guard, the unit that does all the burials at Arlington Cemetery and other national cemeteries, and also does all the White House related ceremonies. And it was through my work in the Ceremonial Guard that I met some Navy bomb disposal divers, which, in the Navy, there's three communities that make up the diving community: the SEAL teams, the EOD, which is bomb disposal, explosive ordnance disposal, and then the Navy divers, who are the ones who do like salvage, ship repair, those types of underwater maintenance kind of divers. And I met this bomb disposal diver and told him my story about the SEAL teams. And I always wanted to be a diver in my life, and ended up going from the Navy Ceremonial Guard to bomb disposal training, which in the Navy starts off as a diver. They kind of weed out everybody in the diving phase, which is very physically and mentally challenging. And then you go from there to, bomb disposal school, which is another year's worth of training to learn how to disarm bombs, not only on the land, but underwater. And then I spent the rest of my career really doing that. I spent 21 years in the Navy, and I made it all the way up to the senior enlisted rank, which in the Navy is Master Chief Petty Officer, and really had a great career. But towards the end of my career, I was working for a couple of leaders, like all of us. I worked for great leaders, and I worked for some real crappy ones. And right at the end of my career, I was working for a really crappy one. And I just thought I could do better. And that's really what led me on this journey, was to get out of the Navy and start my first company and try to be a better leader than, anybody I had ever worked for. And that was my goal in life, really, was to create a great company where people knew their value and knew that they were valued, and to do some great stuff, have a great mission and purpose for the business too. So my first company, we had about 500 employees when we sold the company, and it was a nice company. We were doing mostly government contracting in the counterterrorism world, mostly on the physical aspects of counterterrorism, but we had a small group of guys that did some really interesting IT work around that business as well. So that was my first company. That's kind of what led me here where I'm at today.
Awesome. I know in the past I had Coach Havlick, Navy SEAL, on, and he wrote a leadership book, and he was telling us that the most important thing that any Navy leader needs to have is a good Master Chief. You have to have like the Master Chief. That's the most important role on the ship, and that's pretty awesome that it's kind of come around here. So I kind of went through the same kind of thing when it came to having a bad boss and that bad leadership experience, and that it sort of encouraged me to never be like that. Is that kind of where you've gotten to where, you had that bad experience? You're like, look, I know I can do better. And did it kind of motivate you and inspire you a little bit to get out there and be better?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know that it's as motivational and inspiring. It's just, I think the term I would use is it really kind of it brings your back, your compass on. So every day when you wake up, you've got, every day we get older and your wisdom gets more and more. And, you get to the point where you understand, what bad leaders do that you don't want to do and what good leaders do, and you try to bring it all together as best as you can. And I tell people every day, you try to wake up as the best version of yourself and share all those experiences. And that's really what it does for me every day, is just keeps me from falling, into that trap of what I literally hate. I mean, which is people that don't treat people well.
Yeah, I know for me, it was like, I didn't want my kids to have to go through having that bad boss. So I thought, if I can inspire someone out there to be a better leader, or maybe many people to be better leaders, then maybe eventually that will trickle down and my kids will have that good leader that they can look up to, outside of the family. When they're at their job, their first job or second job or third job, maybe they'll have a leader that was inspired by someone and can really help them out. And they don't have to go through that experience of just having a terrible boss.
And I, as you read this new book we released, we talk about this whole concept of leading yourself first, and that leadership isn't always about a company, right? It's about fatherhood and grandfatherhood. And I spent 21 years in the Navy, and I was deployed for 14 of those 21 years. I was away from my family, and I'm not a bad dad. I'm not a bad person, but being gone is hard on the family. And that's something that I definitely recognize. And now I'm a grandfather, and I think the hopes that you just shared are, what I really hope for my grandkids is that they see that I'm a good role model for them, and that they understand, the philosophies that I have and can bring it back. And the truth is, somebody asked me the other day why I wrote this book. The truth is, I wrote it for them. I mean, it's I hope it sells. I hope it inspires people. Hope it gives people some ideas, but at the end of the day, I really hope it puts my grandkids in a good place in their life.
Yeah. So let's get into the book, Lead Well. So I really like the fact that you did start out with, you have to lead yourself first. And it's one of the things I always talk about, when you're on an airline, the first thing that the flight attendant says is that you got to put your oxygen mask on first before you help those around you, because if you pass out, you can't help them. And that's one of the examples that I use. I really like that you put that first. And I also like that you talked about, you mentioned the things that you need to take care of, like your body, your mind, your finances, and all those things that a lot of other leadership books that I've read before, which I've read, I have a bookshelf of dozens of them, that they don't talk about. And those are really important to get right. And I'll never forget, one of the first times as a manager is probably my first job as a manager, is maybe my second year. It dawned on me that I'd never talked to my team about personal finances or anything like that. So I set up during my one-on-one time, a time just to talk about, here's what you should do for retirement and help people out. And I had two people on my team at the time that were over 50 that had not even started their 401k. It just no one ever talked to them about it, and never been addressed. And it was one of those things that, like, oh man, as a leader, I got to take care of my finances so that I can help others take care of theirs too. And I love the fact that you talk about, finances, body, mind, spirit, and those kind of things.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's so important. I've transitioned from the for-profit world now, although I do sit on the board of a small for-profit company. Most of my work today is at this organization, Boulder Crest, where we work with men and women in uniform, military and first responders, who are suffering with PTSD, mental health issues, depression, anxiety. And we built this wellness triangle, around mind, body, finances, and spirituality. And our goal with that is that people need to work on themselves first. There's a saying in the world of mental health care that hurt people hurt people. And I think that that's very, when I analyze the bad leaders that I had in my life, that is what brings me back to that point, which is why I started the book with that point. And you're right. I mean, I've got hundreds of books on leadership, beside the 40 or so years of being in the Navy and another 20 in industry now, that I've been exposed to leaders, and even in my childhood, my scoutmasters, people that really set me on a good course in my life. My bosses when I was a young kid, I started working, working for other people. I did grass cutting and those things since I was 11 years old, but working for other people, since I was 16 years old. So I've seen a lot, and I've studied a lot. I went to Georgetown. I got a master's degree in public policy management and took ethics classes and leadership classes at Georgetown. And I really firmly believe that, most of these books, whenever they talk about leadership, it's about what you're doing for other people rather than what you're doing for yourself. And that's a big step that you just can't forget.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think there's a fear sometimes to talk about that because it seems almost selfish that you want to take care of yourself. But if you don't take care of yourself, it's impossible to take care of other people. That's like the step one. I love the fact that was the first thing. And then you talk about like having a clear, vision and being able to clearly communicate. And communication is another point that's extremely important with a good leader, is to be able to communicate. What are some things that you talk about when it comes to being able to properly communicate what your vision is for your team and for the future?
Yeah, well, I think, and now we're, I mean, and again, I'll kind of leave it at a high level because I think, whether it's fatherhood or motherhood or grandparenthood, or you're leading a company, whether it's for a nonprofit, leading some sort of a company, or even managing a group of people in your company, which is all these things are important, is the idea that people, they say that humans really yearn for two things. One is this opportunity to contribute, and two is an opportunity to grow. And if you don't understand why you're coming to work every day and where you fit into that puzzle, it becomes very frustrating. Axios did a survey early on during COVID, back in, I think, April of last year. And the survey revealed that 70% of Americans hate their jobs. Now, you can translate that however you want. I think where I've ended up with it is that 70% of people hate going to work because they don't like the people associated with it, right? That's it. Because I mean, most of the time we find something that we're passionate about, whether it's IT or counterterrorism, whatever the subject is, and that job doesn't change much across the industry. But what does change a lot are the people and how people are led and how organizations are led. So, in a modern day world like we live in now, if you get in your car and you don't know where you're going, you plug into your GPS, your map systems, whatever it is. And that's the same thing that leaders have to do, because once you know where you're going, the detours you can take to get there, it makes it easy to drive to that route. And it's the same thing with leadership. And there's just so many organizations, they'll write their vision, these core values and this mission and all on the wall, and nobody really knows what it means and how it means. So for me, it's really building the roadmap, because I think when people know where they're going, they'll know really quick whether or not they fit in with that culture and how they're going to get there. And it really provides that, roadmap to success.
Yeah. So when it comes to communication, one of the biggest parts is the other side of that is listening and being able to listen well. And a lot of, I don't want to call them leaders, but I'll say managers that I've met in the past sometimes just want to hear their voice, and I don't know if it's ego, I don't know what it is, but it's like when a meeting starts, they have to come in with their idea first. And I found the opposite to be important, is to let everybody else talk first and then respond. Well, what is your take on listening?
Well, I think a couple of things about listening. One is I tell people all the time, I think it's the best gift you can give to another human, is to really listen and understand. It's said 100 different ways, but they say if you want to you want to prove that you don't know what you're talking about. Just open your mouth and start talking. And normally that's what happens in these cases. I think ego does have a lot to do with it. I think some people sometimes are put into positions of leadership and management that they're not worthy of, or they don't have the experience for. And one of the ways people believe that you can show that you're important is to talk more. And I think that the two of those just don't jive. I think really what it's all about is listening to understand and not just reply, not just to give people an answer, but to really fully understand everything that's going on, and then to talk. So I do think great leaders listen first and talk last. I mean, it's just the way it is. And especially as you hold meetings and those types of things. But I always tell people there's a great skill set to when you talk to people, watch their lips. And if their lips are moving, or if the first thing that comes out of them after you stop to speak is some sort of advice, walk away from that person, because they haven't listened to what you have to say. And listening is a great skill. Communication is a very difficult thing. I don't think I've ever been in an organization, including the ones I run, where somebody hasn't said, we need to communicate better. We need to communicate better. And I tell people all the time, communication is a two-way street. There's a transmitter and a receiver. And if all you do is hold down the button on that transmit radio, nobody has a chance to respond and receive it. And it goes in one ear and out the other. And that's why this two-way communication is important. And is as important, I say, John, as important as it is for leaders to be clear, it is important for the people that are being led to have that feedback loop, and to have this non-judgment and non-retribution loop where they can come back and say the things that they need to have said and need to be heard. So it's always a challenge. It's possibly the biggest challenge for any organization, but it starts with just good, open, and honest communication.
Yeah, I like that you put that thing about the feedback loop on there, because I've struggled with the past where, sometimes you send out a message or you communicate one way, but you don't know that it's fully received. And sometimes it's difficult to find out if it's fully received without getting that feedback. How is it that a manager or leader of a team can encourage or build a culture around their team that has that transparency, where they can give open and honest feedback? And I'll give you one example. I know for my team, when I first started doing one-on-ones with folks, I didn't feel like I was getting anything but fluff out of them. When I say, like, how am I doing? What can I do better? I was like, oh, you're doing great. You're doing fine. I would never get that negative feedback. So then I started requiring that you tell me one thing that I messed up on, one thing that I did bad on. And then it got even further. I was like, well, no one's talking to me in my office. Let's go for a walk. Let's walk around the pond outside and let's talk there, make it a more neutral environment. What else can leaders do to try to encourage that open, transparent feedback loop?
Well, I think it all starts with, this whole concept of trust and connection. They say that humans crave, connection more than anything. Being around the right people, being open and clear, and building that trust and connection as a leader, I think is important. And the reason people don't tell you what there was a famous leader that I know, remained unnamed, that said, as he made it to a very, very high level in our country's government, and said to me, once you reach this level, you never hear the truth again. And that's a shame, right? It's a shame, one, that he felt that way. But it's a shame too that people can't be honest and open with leaders, and especially as you get into bigger bureaucracies, as it prevents you from being open and honest. And one of the negative things about these feedback loops is that sometimes people who are most vocal just can't say it nicely, right? It comes across more as a complaint than it is a positive level of feedback. And that's why I think it's always incumbent upon the leaders to make sure that they can build this trust and connection, and from day one to let people know that, to challenge them and do it. We have a saying at the organization I run now, say what you mean what you say, but don't say it meanly. And I think, as simple and elementary as that statement is, it's very powerful. And we say attack the issues, not the people. So if we're in a meeting and somebody says, well, Josh didn't do that. I'm saying, well, let's leave Josh out of it. Let's talk about what didn't get done and why. Did we have a process in place that didn't allow for this to get done? Let's not blame the individual, but let's look at the issue, because 90% of the time it's about the way we've outlined, the culture, how we get things done, the processes in place, and the individual doesn't know them well enough. They didn't get onboarded properly. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons that people don't do, what other people want them to do. Most of it's never nefarious. Most people are good. So, that's at the core of it. Excuse me. At the core of it, that's really what we want to do, is to really, say what we mean what we say, but don't say it meanly, and attack the issues, not the people associated with it. And I think if you do those two things, you do build this level of trust and connection that allows for this open communication to occur.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I know that's one of the things we try to do when we're doing like a retrospective in our Scrum meetings, is to not say any names. Names are not allowed. You're not allowed to say any names. Just talk about the process and what broke down in the process. You can't say so-and-so broke down the process.
Right.
Just, be very clear on that, because once a name is out there, then it becomes like very defensive, and the walls of learning are shut down. At that point you can't learn. There's walls up that you can't get over. So that's I like that thing. I like what you're talking about there. One of the other parts that you talk about in your book is about accountability. And I found that it seems like it's harder and harder to hold people accountable these days, and to hold yourself accountable, because everybody has an excuse. Everybody wants to be blameless and find something else. What are some advice that you have for a new leader that needs to develop a culture of accountability?
Well, I mean, I think you said it, John, is start with yourself, right? It's like you have got to, at leaders and managers at all levels have got to show up every day as the best version of themselves. And that's hard, right? I mean, life's happening, especially right now with COVID going on, and the amount of time we're home, and everybody else who's home, and the kids will be in school one day and not the next because they got exposed. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in our lives, and it's hard always to leave that stuff at home. But at the end of the day, what is so important, and I believe what separates good and great leaders specifically, is this ability for people to show up every day, and not with a facade, but to genuinely show up every day as the best version of themselves. And when something's happened, is to be open and honest. Hey, I had to put my dog down last night. That starts to normalize the fact that, okay, I've showed up to work today. I'm going to be the best version of that I can be. But this dog that I had for 15 years has really left, some traumatic and grieving time that I need. But I'm here for you today. But just know that I'm not I'm not the best version of myself. I'm the best I can be today. And I think once you start to do that, and people really start to understand, and you hold yourself accountable in these situations, people respect that, and they hold it up. And I always tell people, like, when, if you look at accountability, as I always think it's positive and negative. It's the pat on the back for doing a great job, and it's the pat on the back for how we can do the job better. And I always tell people that, when you're having those conversations, make it a two-way conversation. Accountability is not about an ass chewing. It's about, hey, this didn't occur right. Here's why. We looked at the processes. The processes are in place, but you didn't follow them. And why didn't you follow them? And to get to the bottom of all of that, and then to even ask the individual, what would you do if you were me? I mean, what do I do here? And the level of those things, issues that come up around, the accountability conversations, can, in the profession I grew up in as a bomb disposal guy, if somebody does something wrong and gets killed or severely injured, sometimes the bomb makes the accountability come together, but the truth is, it's not everything in life is that life threatening. And that's one of the things that I think bad leaders do, is that they make everything seem like it's the end of the world, right? It's like you violated something that probably could be fixed with a good conversation and maybe an update of the policy manual. But that's one of the things that I think bad leaders do, is they always jump right to the conclusion that it was the person's fault and not the system's fault. And I've just always been the opposite, is let's look at the system first, as you said, and when you have these meetings with no names, and then make sure we understand it. And maybe we didn't do a good job as an organization training the individual on how to do what he did. So that accountability is very broad, in the sense of the system and of the people involved in it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And a lot of times when leaders, do have problems, there are those ones that take everything to the, level 10. It's a huge deal. You messed up. But I always like to say, well, are we brain surgeons? Does anybody die? I guess, working in bomb disposal, I guess that really could happen and does happen. So that's a little bit different. But, we're in IT. We fix people's computers, right? So somebody's internet went down. Yeah. Did anybody die? Okay, no, let's figure out how we can prevent that from happening next time. And, it's not the end of the world. But we also need to understand that we all have jobs to do and we have responsibilities. And, when we let someone down, we've done something that we shouldn't do. We need to figure out how to correct that and how to prevent that from happening in the future. I like what you talked about being accountable first of, how do you hold yourself accountable? I know for me, it was part of that was doing this podcast. When I first became a manager, I kind of sucked at it. I had a lot of turnover. I always thought that you had to just work harder and harder and harder. And I didn't realize that I didn't scale working that way. And so I started this podcast because as I was learning leadership techniques, I wanted to vocalize it in a way that my team members can hold me accountable. They can listen to the things, they can listen to this conversation that we're having right here. And whenever I say that, hey, I do this in a one-on-one, they can hold me to that and say, well, no, you don't, So I want to make sure that I'm as accountable as possible. I know when I first, I wanted to run a marathon. So I posted it on Facebook and Twitter. Hey, I'm going to train for this marathon. Put it out there publicly so that I can be held accountable for for either doing it or not doing it, depending on how it panned out. So.
Well, I'll give you, you mentioned the life and death stuff. I grew up in a business that was literally life or death. You train hard, to follow the procedures. And when the procedures don't work for you, you make sure that they get rewritten properly, whatever it might be. But I did grow up, I made 1,000 jumps out of airplanes. I made over 1,000 dives in the ocean. I mean, all of these things, every time you left the surface and went diving underwater, there was a chance of dying. Every time you left an airplane, there was a chance of dying. And just last week, you mentioned Coach Havlick, John Havlick, who's a great friend of mine. John was a SEAL and very respectable SEAL and did some amazing things in his career. But last week, we had a commanding officer of a SEAL team down in Norfolk who died in a training accident. It's like, everything we do has these like really severe implications. But let me give you another example, which may resonate with your audience. When I ran my company, we had a very robust proposal shop. We had to, write the proposals, make sure they were compliant with the statement of work, just like you do and everybody else that's listening on this podcast probably does. We had a proposal due one night at midnight, one particular day at midnight, the proposal was due. And we were working hard on it up to the last minute, going back to the graphics shop for additional graphics and making sure the costs were all properly done. And that proposal got uploaded at 12:03. Actually, I take that back. The proposal didn't get uploaded at 12:03 when they hit enter. When they hit enter on that proposal, it would not upload. And when the people came to me who were responsible for that, the first thing out of their mouth that they told me was that the system was down. Now, that was a lie. Because when we went back and forensically looked at it, which as an IT guy, you can easily do, it was pretty damn clear that they hit enter at 12:03. And it was pretty damn clear that thing was due at 12 o'clock. And I think it was a big proposal. It was $25 million. We lost that bid to a competitor who I think even the customer knew we could be better. We knew the customer well. We even went to the customer and asked for a 3-minute, waiver on that because of the fact that we missed the boat, but there was nothing it can do. It was a government proposal that's very strictly, monitored and run, and there was nothing that could be done by the customer or by us. And we lost $25 million over 5 years, $25 million worth of work. That's a lot of money. Yeah. And somebody had to be held accountable. And I wasn't that mad. And truthfully, even thinking about it right now, I wasn't that mad about the 25 million. We had a nice company. We had a lot of work and we had other opportunities that would offset the loss, financial loss. What I was so pissed off about was the fact that these guys lied to me. And that's something, to me, that if you don't hold people accountable for that, that behavior starts to really, proliferate through your organization. And I'm a firm believer that, I define culture as the way an organization gets done. When you start to disrupt that culture, and by turning a blind eye to that and not holding people accountable, it then becomes the way. It becomes the new culture, the way that things get done. And I fired 2 guys over that, and it was hard because they were damn good people and damn good proposal writers. But the fact that the first thing out of their mouth was a lie, it's just, I couldn't live with that, and I didn't think as an organization we could live with it either. And that's just another story that may resonate. Not life or death by any means, but nothing's worse than being lied to.
Yeah, I agree. I think once you've lost that trust, it takes a lot to get it back, And, I have students, I teach part-time at Winthrop University, and since COVID, so before COVID, it was all in the classroom. And then when COVID happened, they made us go remote. So now we do a kind of a hybrid thing where some things are online and some things are in the classroom. And now I do a lot of grades where they have to log in and upload their grades at a certain time. And, and it shuts off after that time. So if you get it, you can't do it past that time. And they'll say, oh, well, the system like shut me out. And I'm like, well, that's funny because other people did it just fine. They did it right up to like the minute. But yeah, I think that's kind of funny when people try to fool the IT guys, because you can always go back and check.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about the fact that, I think it's in your book. You mentioned that, or maybe you said it here. It's hard for me to put the two together about the only secret between 2 people is when one person's dead. Yeah. There's always going to be a way to find out. So it's best just to never lie. Just come clean with it.
Yeah, that's an old saying. I have a friend of mine who spent 42 years in the CIA, and that's his old saying. I love repeating it though, because I think it's so true. It's secrets don't stay. It's people talk. And, I remember one of the first business books I ever read was Jack Welch, who was running GE, or just finished running GE, and it was called, one of his books was called Straight from the Gut, and he talks in there about salaries and bonuses, and how no matter what he ever did, no matter how strict he was about telling people don't talk about salaries and bonuses, the information always got out. And I think that was a great example in it. And you see it every day in corporate America.
Yeah. So in your book, you talk about giving back, and I think you're a big example for that with, the different organizations, the EOD Warrior, and what's the other one? My mind's going blank. Yeah, Boulder Crest. It's nonprofits that you put together to give back. Can you explain how giving back is beneficial for leaders and how important it is?
Yeah. Well, I'll go all the way back to the beginning of the book. And when I was in Georgetown, which is a Jesuit school, some amazing learning that occurs there, as it does at most universities. I read a book called The Cathedral Within, and it was a book about leadership and ethics and morals, and creating this ultimate cathedral within, right, of who we are. And Bill Shore, as the author, defined leadership as helping people get to a place that they can't get to on their own. And that's really, to me, what giving back is all about. And I say this not to brag, but just to tell you where I come from. Is that I live in the richest county in the United States, Loudoun County, Virginia. Now that's based upon the mean average income, but it's a pretty damn wealthy place, and most of the people in this county do very well. I live in the far western edge of the county, which is very rural, and we don't see a lot of problems, crime, specifically out here, homelessness, those types of things. But if you go 20 miles east in this county, you can see the worst that humanity has to offer: abused women's shelters, food banks, MS-13 gangs, opioid addictions, and drug and alcohol, all the things that happen in any part of America, any part of the world, arguably. And I think that as leaders, once you get that title, it becomes incumbent upon us to do things to help people get to a place that they can't get to on their own. Now, you don't have to do what I've done. I've been very fortunate, to get to the place that I am and to start nonprofits. But it's like any community just needs some help, right? It's like the local animal rescue place. Somebody needs to wash their blankets and dog beds. Somebody maybe needs to buy them some food. Maybe the local horse rescue place needs some hay for the winter, or some horse blankets for the winter. The local food bank needs help, running some food donations. I mean, this local soup kitchen needs help feeding the homeless on the weekend. There are all these small things that can be done in communities to help, because I think that's the power of this nation. And I'll say this, I've been all over the world. I've been to all 50 states, and I've been to more countries than I've been states. And I'll say this, that philanthropically, this is the most powerful country in the world. And that the secret to our success is to turn off the 24-hour news, turn off the social media, and do what you can do to make your community the best that it can be. And I think if every American did that, we wouldn't have half of the problems we have in this country. And that's not what happens. We get spun up on social media, we get spun up by the news, most of which isn't true. And or at least it's put out in a negative view. And it prevents us from doing what's good, And I'm not a very religious person. I believe spirituality. We define spirituality in three ways: your character, your relationships with other people, and your service to others. And I think if, no matter who you talk to in the religious world and what religions they are, historically, we can all agree that this guy named, Jesus walked on the earth, and that he had a simple message, which was really treat people the way you want to be treated. And if we all just did that, this would be a much better world. And that's what I hope for. And that's why giving back and service is so important to me.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And, I couldn't agree more with anything that you said. I do want to give one example of how giving back has helped me and my teams as a leader in the past. When I mentioned before, I was a first manager, and I kind of sucked at it. I had a really high turnover rate. So at one point, I had 6 people on my team. And I remember at one point, half my team was empty seats because I just lost everybody. And I decided to make a change. And that's when I got into reading leadership books and watching TED Talks and whatever I could to figure out, what can I try? What can I do? And I remember one person talking about how, as a group, if you volunteer together, you'll stay together. And I started doing these things where we would do once a quarter, we would use our lunch breaks as a team. And I made it mandatory, which now looking back on it, maybe I shouldn't have done that because I didn't talk to HR or my boss. I just did it. I was like, all right, we're all going to use our lunch this Friday. We're going to go to the soup kitchen and we're going to serve soup. Very simple stuff, not big stuff. And we did that a couple of times. And then next thing I know, one person on my team was like, hey, I signed us up to volunteer at the Children's Attention Home. They're doing this thing and we're going to do that for our service. And so we did that. And then it got to, we were doing it every month. And then sometimes we would do it, for a half day. It was like, we're going to go at lunch and the rest of the day, we're going to be doing something, a volunteer activity. And then one day after about a year, I realized that I hadn't lost anybody. We hadn't had any turnover this year. And then one person came to me and said, hey, I signed up to do a habitat build, and I'd like for us all to do it. Now, this is a week long, so we have to use a week of vacation. And they said, so we all agreed to sign up and do it, and you're going to do it too. And this is my team telling me that as the manager. And we did. And for 3 years, we had no turnover on the team. Wow. It was just one of those things where we all stay in touch together today. We're all, even though I don't work at that company, and actually only one person out of that team still works at that company, we all eventually went our ways. But for that period of time, our productivity went up, our team relationships went up, our turnover rate went down, and everybody became part of something bigger than what we did as a job. Yeah. And I just feel like giving back does that to you, and it kind of brings you together in a way that's, I don't know how you can do it without giving back. I don't know how you can do it any other way.
Well, I mean, I think it's it's a difference between selfish and selfless, right? This whole concept of what can I do to help others. But I'll leave you with one thought on my book is that, although there's 10 things that I believe are timeless, you hear it all the time. Oh, this newfangled way of leadership, or this next generation, the millennials need this type of leadership versus this type. I think all of that is BS. I think at the end of the day, and this is what I wrote, this is the main reason I wrote this book, is I think these 10 things are really timeless, and they're not individual. They're not like stovepipe. All of these things kind of cross and bring it back. So I want to bring back giving back to leading yourself first. And the way I tell people is that volunteering and doing what you described, your team was doing, volunteering is as good, if not even better, for the people who are volunteering than the people who are receiving the benefits of that volunteerism. One of the reasons I say that is because when you help people who maybe can't help themselves, you talk about these soup kitchens and Habitat for Humanity, places where there is really a need, where the people that are in those situations can't help themselves and need people from the outside to help them. That's leadership. And when you do that, it normalizes the pain and agony and the trauma and the grief that we're suffering, to show you in some form or fashion, at the highest level, it shows you that no matter how bad things are, somebody's got it worse.
Yep.
And I think what that does is it starts to build what I believe is mental toughness. It starts to build you in this place where, okay, that made me stronger. The work I do at Boulder Crest is based on the science of something called post-traumatic growth. This concept of what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And that's really what happens. So the best leaders at the end of the day, these ones that lead themselves first and have this, aurora around them, this way that you look at that individual, because, man, that is who I want to be. She's what I want to be. He's what I want to be. When you see that, it's because they do all of this and they put it in place. And I tell you, the ones that you point to say that, you can almost guarantee that when you go up and talk to them about their giving back, it's something like you described, John, something substantial in your life.
Yeah, I know for me, whenever we volunteer either at church or, with our family, we try to, take our kids out to do those things every now and then, whether it's we did some landscaping at one of the homeless shelters one time, and with the kids, and having seen a 3-year-old rake leaves, they're not doing a great job, but they're getting something out of it, and as much as they're giving. And whenever you give, I think you're getting that much or more in return every time.
I agree. And they learn great lessons. The first fundraiser I ever did for anything was for a hospice. And I remember raising some money for this local hospice. And I thought, why did it, I did an Eagle Scout project years ago, and I helped on several friends' Eagle Scout projects, but it was really the first thing I felt like I had done to help somebody else, in a very meaningful way. And that, that's something that's it's never left me. I'll always remember that. That's why I think it's so powerful.
So before we finish up here, tell us a little bit about the Eod Warrior and the Boulder Crest Foundation, what those two organizations are, and how can someone maybe find out more about them or help out?
Yeah, well, my wife and I started early in the war. We started the Eod Warrior Foundation, which is a foundation just focused on helping people who were bomb disposal specialists. In every service, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, there's a bomb disposal community. And in the Navy, the only difference is in the Navy, we also have an underwater mission because of the sea. But we were here in the Washington, D.C. area when the first severely injured troops were being medevac back here to the Walter Reed and Bethesda hospitals. And we started this nonprofit really to help them and help their families offset some of the costs associated with these long hospital stays. Eod Warrior Foundation, I'm not personally involved anymore, other than, as a donor and a contributor, but it was something we started and something that's still going strong. They're headquartered down in Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, and Destin, Florida, Niceville, Florida, and you can see what they do at the EODWarriorFoundation.org. It was through the work with wounded EOD troops that my wife and I ended up donating 37 acres of our estate here in Virginia and building the nation's first privately funded retreat center for combat veterans, which is Boulder Crest Foundation, which I am the chairman of the board of today. We have two beautiful centers, one here in Virginia where I live and one in Arizona. And you can learn more about that at bouldercrest.org. But at the highest level, our mission is to teach military personnel and first responders. We've been doing some work with some frontline healthcare workers over COVID as well, but teach them how to live a life of post-traumatic growth, how to build this level of mental toughness, and to know that none of us are grieving on our own. So those are great programs. I'm a firm believer that the nation's mental health system is broken, and what we're trying to do at Boulder Crest is really change the way that things get done for veterans and first responders.
Awesome. So how can people connect with you, pick up a copy of your book, Lead Well, and learn more about the things that you're working on?
Yeah, well, I think, tomorrow, December 14th is the launch date for the book. The first week or so, the ebook, the Kindle book's only 99 cents. The paperbacks, I think the paperbacks won't ship out until the new year, but you can in fact order them on Amazon. I'm very open on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And feel free to message me if you need more information. And I'm happy to share my email address and whatever else we need to do to set something up. But yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for coming here, and thank you for your service, both in the military for our country, and as well as all the things you're doing outside of that service as well for the troops and anybody that needs it, and for writing these books for leaders so that we can, be better at what we do as well. So thanks so much. I really appreciate having you on.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.